They cut down my trees while I was out of town. And at first, I honestly thought I was losing my mind. Not metaphorically, not in some dramatic way. I mean, I stood in my own backyard, staring at sunlight where there had never been sunlight before, trying to remember if maybe, just maybe, I had imagined those trees all along. But I hadn't. I knew those trees. I planted 2 of them myself. The other ones had been there longer than I had. Tall oaks that swayed just enough in the wind to sound like the ocean at night. The kind of trees that make a place feel settled, like it belongs to itself. And now they were gone. Just gone. Only 4 pale raw stumps left behind. Like someone had erased part of my life with a clean, confident hand. I live in a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina. Well, technically outside the town limits, where things get a little quieter, a little less regulated, and people tend to mind their own business, which is exactly why I bought that house 8 years ago. It backed up to a private golf course, which at the time felt like a bonus, not the main attraction. I don't even golf, still don't. What sold me was the line of oak trees along the back edge of the property. They created this natural wall, shade in the summer, windbreak in the winter, and just enough privacy to make you forget there was an entire fairway on the other side. You could hear the occasional thwack of a driver, maybe someone cursing under their breath after a bad shot, but you couldn't see them. And more importantly, they couldn't see you. That mattered to me. I work from home, I keep odd hours, and I like my quiet. Those trees were a boundary, not just legally, but mentally. They made the place mine. Now, about 2 years ago, everything changed. The golf course got sold to a development group out of Charlotte. Big money, big plans. You could tell right away they weren't interested in just maintaining the place. They were upgrading it. New clubhouse, new landscaping, rumors of luxury homes going up along the back 9. The kind of project where the word community gets thrown around a lot. But what they really mean is profit per square foot. At first, I didn't think much of it. People buy things, they change things. That's life. Then one afternoon, I get a knock at the door. I open it, and there's this guy standing there. Mid-40s, clean-cut, expensive sunglasses even though it wasn't that sunny. The kind of guy who smiles before he says anything, like he already knows how the conversation is supposed to go. "Hey there," he says, sticking out his hand. "Name's Daniel Cross. I'm managing the course redevelopment." I shake his hand, a little cautious but polite. "All right," I say, "what can I do for you?" He glances past me like he's already mapping the property in his head, then nods toward the back. "We're doing some improvements along the fairway behind your place. New tee box, upgraded layout, trying to elevate the experience a bit." I shrug. "As long as it stays on your side of the fence." He chuckles at that like we're sharing a joke. Of course. Actually, that's kind of why I'm here." And then he says it casual, almost offhand, like it's no big deal. "Those trees along your property line, they're blocking the sight line from the new premium tee." I remember just looking at him for a second, not even reacting right away, because I was waiting for the part where he clarified what he meant. So I said, "He keeps smiling. Well, ideally, we'd want a clear view from the tee box down the fairway. It's part of the design. Improves play aesthetics. You know how it is." I didn't actually, but I did know one thing. Those trees are on my property. I told him flat and simple. He nods immediately, like he expected that answer. "Totally understand," he says. "We respect property boundaries." And that was it. Or at least that's what I thought, because 2 weeks later I left town for a long weekend. Just a short trip. Went to visit my sister over in Tennessee. Nothing fancy. Left Friday morning, came back late Sunday afternoon. And the moment I pulled into my driveway, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The house looked the same. The porch, the gravel drive, the mailbox leaning a little more than it should. All of that was normal. But the light was wrong. Too bright, too open. I walked around the side of the house, and that's when it hit me. The shade was gone. That cool, dappled light I'd gotten used to. It just wasn't there anymore. And then I saw the stumps, 4 of them, clean cuts, low to the ground, still pale and fresh, like exposed bone. I just stood there for a while. Didn't yell, didn't call anyone. I just stood there trying to process how something that big could disappear in a single weekend without anyone saying a word to me. Through the gap where the trees used to be, I could see straight onto the golf course, clear as day, and right there, maybe 40 yards out, was a brand new tee box, raised, leveled, perfectly positioned with a direct line of sight into my backyard. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so blatant it almost felt like a joke, like they really thought they could just do that. I walked down to the edge of my property, where a couple of maintenance guys were working near a cart path. "Hey," I called out. They looked up a little wary. "Those trees back there, who told you to cut them?" One of them shrugged, leaning on his rake. "We were told to clear overgrowth along the boundary." "Those weren't overgrowth," I said. "Those were my trees." Another shrug. "We just follow orders, man." And that was it. No apology, no explanation, just a quiet little wall of indifference. I walked back to the house that evening, grabbed the old property survey from a drawer I hadn't opened in years, and spread it out on the kitchen table. And as I traced the boundary line with my finger, something in me shifted, because those trees, they weren't even close to the edge. They were well inside my property, which meant this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision, a deliberate one. And standing there, looking at those lines on paper, I realized something else. They hadn't just taken my trees. They'd made a mistake. A big one. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry. Well, okay, I was angry, but it was something sharper than that. Something colder. The kind of feeling that settles in your chest when you realize someone didn't just cross a line. They assumed you wouldn't do anything about it. And that part bothered me more than the trees because it meant they'd already decided who I was. Quiet guy, lives alone, keeps to himself, probably won't make a fuss. They weren't entirely wrong about the first part, but they were about to be very wrong about the second. The next morning, I called a surveyor. Name was Pete Holloway. Older guy, gravel voice. Sounded like he'd spent more time outdoors than most people spend awake. I found him through a local listing, and when I explained the situation, there was a pause on the line, then a low chuckle. "Let me guess," he said. "Developer came in, started moving lines that weren't theirs to move." "Something like that." "Yeah," he muttered. "Seen it before. I'll be out tomorrow." Pete showed up just after sunrise the next day, driving a truck that looked like it had been through 3 different decades, and refused to retire. No small talk, no nonsense. He just nodded at me, grabbed his equipment, and got to work. I followed him out back. He moved slow, methodical, setting markers, checking angles, cross-referencing the old survey with his measurements. Every now and then, he'd grunt or mutter something under his breath, like he was having a private argument with the land itself. After about an hour, he straightened up, wiped his hands on his jeans, and looked at me. "Well," he said, "you're not crazy. Good to know." He pointed toward the stumps. "Every single one of those, at least 6 feet inside your boundary. Not even close." I let that sit for a second. 6 feet? Yep, that's not a mistake. One of those looks that says he's seen enough of the world to not be surprised anymore. "No," he said, "that's someone thinking they won't get called on it." He planted bright orange markers along the actual property line. Clear, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Then he handed me a copy of the updated survey. "If this goes where I think it's going," he said, "you're going to want documentation." I nodded. "Oh, I plan to." After he left, I walked the line again slowly this time. Each marker felt like a quiet little anchor, something solid in the middle of all that nonsense. And then I started taking pictures. The stumps, the markers, the distance between them, angles, close-ups, wide shots. I documented everything like I was building a case, because at that point, I already knew I was. But here's the thing. Proving they crossed the line was only part of it. What really mattered was leverage. And leverage doesn't come from being right. It comes from understanding what the other side needs. So I started digging. Permits, zoning filings, county records, all the boring paperwork most people never look at unless they absolutely have to. Turns out when they built that new tee box, they had to get special approval from the county. Not because of the structure itself, but because it changed the drainage pattern of the course. Anytime you mess with elevation like that, water has to go somewhere, and the county doesn't like surprises when it comes to runoff. So they issued a conditional permit, and buried in that permit was a clause. One line, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Existing tree buffers adjacent to residential properties must be maintained to preserve safety and visual separation. I read that line 3 times, then I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time since I got home. Because suddenly this wasn't just about my trees anymore. This was about their entire project. I filed a complaint with the county planning department that afternoon. Didn't make it dramatic, didn't exaggerate, just laid out the facts. Property line confirmed, trees removed without permission, permit condition violated. Attached photos, survey, everything. About 5 days later, a white county truck pulled up outside my house. 2 inspectors stepped out, one younger, clipboard in hand, the other older, moving slower, but looking at everything like he'd seen every trick in the book. I met them in the yard. "Morning." The younger one said, "We're here about the complaint. Figured you might be." I walked them through it, showed them the markers, the stumps, the survey. They measured everything themselves. Quiet, professional, no small talk. The older inspector crouched near one of the stumps, ran his hand across the cut surface, then looked up at me. "These were healthy," he said. "Yeah," I replied, "they were." They didn't say much after that. Just nodded, made notes, took their own photos. Then we walked over to the tee box. Standing there, it was even more obvious. Without the trees, there was nothing stopping a ball from flying straight into my yard. No barrier, no buffer, just open space. The younger inspector pointed downrange. "So from here," he said, "a slice or hook could carry right over into that property." "Exactly," I said. The older one didn't even look surprised. He just sighed. "Which is exactly why that buffer requirement exists." We stood there for a moment, looking at the same line of sight the developers had been so eager to create. Clean, open, and now a problem. They left without saying much else. But 2 days later I got my answer. A notice was posted at the tee box. "Stop. Use order. Until further notice, the structure could not be used." Just like that. Brand new construction shut down. I'd be lying if I said I didn't walk out there that evening just to look at it. Not to gloat. Okay, maybe a little to gloat. Golfers were already gathering nearby, confused, asking questions. Staff didn't have answers. And sitting there right in the middle of all that money and planning was a silent, unusable piece of infrastructure. All because of 4 trees, or more accurately, because someone decided those trees didn't matter. 2 days after that, I heard a knock on my door again. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Daniel Cross stood there. Same polished look, same expensive sunglasses, but the smile was tighter this time, less confident, more calculated. "Hey," he said, "got a minute?" I leaned against the doorframe. "Depends. You here to tell me how my trees ended up on your side of the decision-making process?" He exhaled slowly, like he'd rehearsed this conversation. "Look," he said, "there was a miscommunication with the landscaping crew." "No," I cut in, calm but firm, "there wasn't." He paused. I could see it in his eyes. That quick recalculation, that moment where he realizes the script he brought isn't going to work. "We believe the trees were part of the boundary buffer," he tried again. "They were," I said, "on my side of it." Silence. Then he shifted gears. "All right," he said, "let's talk solutions." I crossed my arms. "Go ahead. We can plant new trees along the fence line. Smaller ones, fast-growing species will restore the look, keep things compliant." I actually laughed. Not loud, not mocking, just enough to make the point. "You cut down 30-year-old oaks," I said, "and you want to replace them with saplings?" "They'll grow in about 20 years, I interrupted. "Meanwhile, your tee box stays closed, right?" That hit. I saw it land. He glanced past me toward the backyard, toward the empty space where the trees used to be. Because now that space wasn't just mine anymore. It was their problem too. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting. I was driving. I stepped inside for a second, grabbed a folder from the kitchen counter, and came back. "Here's the thing," I said, handing it to him. He opened it. Inside was an estimate. Professional landscaping company, detailed, itemized for mature oak trees, transplanted reinforced root systems, immediate canopy coverage, plus something extra. A high-tension protective net system installed along the course-facing side. He flipped through the pages slower now, more serious. "This isn't cheap," he said. I shrugged. "Neither is a closed tee box." He looked up at me, and I could tell. Now he understood. This wasn't about replacing trees. This was about correcting a mistake. On my terms, Daniel didn't say anything for a while. Just stood there on my porch, flipping through the estimate, like maybe the numbers would change if he looked at them long enough. They didn't. I could see it happening in real time, the shift from confidence to calculation, from "we can smooth this over" to "this might actually hurt." He closed the folder slowly. "For mature oaks," he said almost to himself, "you know how difficult that is to source and transplant properly?" "Yeah," I said. "That's why they're expensive." He gave a small, tight smile. "And the netting system? That's overkill, don't you think?" I leaned against the doorframe again, kept my voice even. "Not really. Not when golf balls are already landing in my yard." Almost like it was on cue. We both heard it. Quack. A ball sailed wide from somewhere down the fairway, bounced once, then rolled to a stop about 10 feet from my back steps. Daniel turned his head slowly, watching it settle. Neither of us said anything for a second. Then I nodded toward it. "That's overkill?" I asked. He exhaled through his nose. "Just barely." "No," he admitted. "That's not ideal." "No," I said, "it's not." And right there, that quiet little moment with a stray golf ball sitting in my grass, that was the entire situation in a nutshell. They wanted a better view. They got it. And now everything that view allowed was their problem. Daniel adjusted his grip on the folder. "Look," he said, tone shifting again, softer this time, more measured. "We didn't intend for this to escalate like this." I nodded. "I believe that." He blinked a little surprised. "But you still let it happen," I added. That landed harder, because intention doesn't really matter when the result is already sitting there in your backyard, cut down and irreversible. He glanced back toward the course again. I followed his eyes. Even from my porch, you could see the tee box clearly now, and used, empty, a clean, expensive structure with a bright orange notice posted on the side like a scarlet letter. A couple of golfers stood nearby, talking to one of the staff, clearly frustrated. You didn't need to hear them to know the tone. People pay good money for a premium experience, and right now, that experience came with a closed feature and a whole lot of questions. Daniel saw it too, and for the first time since I met him, he looked tired. Not physically, more like mentally. The way someone looks when the numbers in their head stop adding up the way they're supposed to. "If we agree to this," he said, finally tapping the estimate, "how quickly can it be done?" I didn't answer right away. Let the silence sit for a second. Not to be dramatic, just to make sure we both understood what the question meant. Because that was it. That was the moment. They weren't negotiating anymore. They were asking. "The company says 2 to 3 weeks," I said. "They've done this before. Large transplants, reinforced root systems, irrigation support. It's not just dropping trees in the ground and hoping for the best." He nodded slowly, and the netting installed at the same time. He ran a hand over his jaw, thinking. Then he asked the only question he had left. "And if we don't?" I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because now we were finally being honest. "Then I built my own solution," I said. He frowned slightly. "What does that look like?" I stepped off the porch, and walked a few feet into the yard, motioning for him to follow. Right along the property line, where Pete's markers still stood bright against the ground. I stopped and turned back to him. "Right here," I said. 20-foot barrier fence, steel posts, reinforced mesh, completely within my property line. His eyes narrowed. "That would block the view from the tee box." "Yeah," I said. "Pretty much completely." "And you're allowed to do that?" I shrugged. Already checked that part wasn't a bluff. Once I realized balls could now travel directly into my yard, I started looking into local ordinances. Turns out, when a neighboring property creates a safety risk, you're well within your rights to protect yourself. Height restrictions didn't apply the same way when it came to safety barriers, which meant I could build something tall, and very effective. Daniel looked past me again, this time not at the empty space, but at what could be there instead. A wall. A big one, right where his premium view was supposed to be. And I could see a click. Not just the cost, but the optics. Because one thing developers hate more than unexpected expenses is visible failure. A massive barrier fence along the edge of a polished golf course that tells a story, and not the kind they want their investors or customers to see. He let out a long breath. "All right," he said quietly. "No arguments, no pushback, just that." I nodded once. "All right." We stood there for a second, neither of us rushing to say anything else. Then he extended his hand. This time, no rehearsed smile, no polished introduction, just a straightforward gesture. I shook it. Firm, simple, done. 3 days later, I got the confirmation in writing. They approved the full plan. Every detail, the trees, the installation, the netting, all of it. And not long after that, the work started. Now, if you've never seen a mature tree transplant, it's something else. They don't just dig it up and move it like a houseplant. It's cranes, root balls the size of small cars, crews coordinating every inch, like surgery, but for something that's been alive longer than most of the people standing around it. I watched the whole thing from my porch. Not out of spite, not even out of satisfaction, really. More like closure. One by one, those new oaks went into the ground. Not the same trees. Obviously, nothing replaces what was there. But close enough that over time, the space started to feel like itself again. And along the coursing side, they installed the netting. Tall, nearly invisible from a distance, but strong enough to stop anything coming off that tee. A quiet boundary, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be effective. A couple weeks later, the county came back out, inspected everything, checked the buffer, the safety measures, all of it. And just like that, the stop order was lifted. The tee box opened. Golfers came back, and life more or less moved on. But not entirely, because every now and then, I'll be out in the yard, early morning, coffee in hand, watching the light come through those leaves again, and I'll think about how close it came to going the other way. If I hadn't checked the survey, if I hadn't looked into the permit, if I just accepted the miscommunication and let them plant a few decorative shrubs, that tee box would be open. My yard would still be exposed, and those trees, they'd just be gone, like they never mattered. And that's the part that sticks with me. Not the money, not the back and forth, but how easy it is for something important to you to mean absolutely nothing to someone else, unless you make it matter. Now here's the thing I keep going back to. I didn't sue them. I didn't go after damages, even though I probably could have. I just made them fix the problem they created, on my terms. And sometimes I wonder, was that the right call, or should I have pushed further, held them accountable in a bigger way? Because yeah, I got my trees back, but they still went ahead with the rest of that development. Still building houses, still selling that premium view, just with a little more caution now. So I'll ask you this. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing, or would you have taken it further? Let me know what you think, because I've heard both sides, and honestly, I'm still not sure there's a clean answer. And if you've ever had someone cross a line, literally or not, and had to decide how far to push back, I'd really like to hear that story.